Hello and welcome to Corpse Club. This is one of your co-hosts, Bryan Christopher, and I am joined by the remaining two amigos. It has been a long time since we have been together. We've got Scott Drebit and we've got Derek Anderson. How are you doing, gents?
Doing swell. It's good to have the three horsemen of the apocalypse back in action. your horsemen on a budget.
we keep trying to get away from that, but you just can't let it go.
Your Dollar Tree horsemen riding into not the best Western town, but the third best Western town on the strip. That's us, folks.
Yeah, I always forget we're the three horsemen. If Jonathan were here, it would be the four amigos.
That's right. Let's get our mythology correct. For the archives.
Sorry, Derek, we cut you off, but with reality, what were you saying?
Go ahead.
I just think we're a shameless knockoff version of the apocalypse, and there's no shame in that.
Gotcha. We can only afford three horsemen. I get it.
Shameless is key. It's one of my life mottos, shameless. So yeah,
words to live by. But it is good to be back because it feels like it has been quite some time, and it's the middle of the summer already as we record this. So it's good to beat the heat and record an episode of Corpse Club with the Daily Dead fam. It's definitely I feel like it's long overdue.
And
what is your shirt, Derek? I'm sorry, Brian.
Oh.
I just wanted to see what was on Derek's t-shirt there for the folks at home. Looks like it's a good horror shirt. What do we got? The Ultimate Death Match.
You're dying
to see Freddy versus Jason.
The Springwood Slasher
versus
the I can't read.
The
Unstoppable Killing Machine.
Unstoppable Killing Machine.
I also love that Derek can't read his own shirt. So I feel like we haven't missed a beat.
Never seen it before.
We were a dumpster fire before, and we're a dumpster fire now.
He doesn't know his own phone number either. And it's on the shirt.
We're already talking over each other.
Inside of my shirt.
We're already talking over each other. We're doing visual jokes on a podcast. We're just coming out swinging right away. How are you doing, Mr.
Have it
Drebit?
any other way.
I'm doing well. Sweltering up here in the north, just as below, as above, as below, as the saying goes. Just trying to get through the summer to hopefully a cooler fall, as they say. But again, when it's too cold, I complain. So I shouldn't complain when it's too hot, but that's my right to do that as well. So here we are. I'm just boxing it out with the summer, my friend. Trying to just stay frosty.
That's the all we can ask for at this point. And tonight we're gonna be mixing things up a little bit. We are going to be doing our usual kind of grab bag of recently consumed horror media, but we have to shift things up a little bit. We will not be talking about movies tonight because we are here to support the Writers Guild and the Screen Actors Guild in their ongoing strike. For those who I can't imagine you're listening to this and are unfamiliar, but both the Writers Guild and the Screen Actors Guild have gone on strike because they are basically getting paid nothing for the work that they do. The landscape of entertainment has changed drastically over the years with streaming options, with the introduction of AI, and it seems like it's getting to the point where those things are being weaponized against the people doing the work. You have people who are getting pennies in residuals, literal pennies. Like one of the actors from Abbott Elementary recently revealed that he literally got a 3-cent residual check for the work that he does on there. And they're the ones doing the work. And we can't, like, as much as people want to say AI can take over, that would be just horrible on so many different levels. So we are supporting both of those unions in their ongoing strike by not talking about any movies tonight. and we may continue to do that for as long as the strike goes on. Fortunately, we have plenty of other media which we can consume horror. So we're going to be talking about some different video games tonight. We're going to be talking about some books we've read, some different comic books, and so I'm excited to dig into that.
I also have hand puppets.
We're gonna get creative, folks.
Good, another visual another visual treat for our podcast listeners.
Yes.
Oh man. All right. I think I'm going to kick us off. I know the host usually kicks it off to someone else, but I'm a selfish prick, so we're going to start off with me. And we're going to do something nice and recent.
No, everyone shut up. No, you're not.
We're clamoring to try and stop Bryan here, but he's taking control as the host. There's no turning back now.
Yes, you're clearly trying to stop me from outing myself as an ass, because nobody knows about that.
We're trying to hack into the mainframe, but to no avail.
All right, I'm sorry, big fella. What do you have for us? What do we got?
We are going to talk about the latest entry in probably my favorite video game series of all time, Diablo IV. Came out in June of this year, a solid 10 plus years after Diablo 3 came out. I'm always kind of amazed at how much time there is between. If I remember correctly, I think the first one came out in 97. So this is this is approaching a 30-year franchise. And there's always a big chunk of time in between each entry. It's usually kind of one of those things where when they start talking about the next sequel coming out, you can basically count on there being another 3 or 4 years before you're going to see anything about it, before you're actually going to see the game.
Yep.
And so for those who are unaware, this is a horror fantasy RPG where you play, one kind of, fairly classic trope class in fighting off the hordes of Diablo and his various cohorts and brothers, and in this case, sister. This particular entry focuses on the demon Lilith. So I was excited for this when they first announced it. I'll get into some of kind of my initial thoughts on the game, but I'm first interested to hear, Scott, Derek, do either of you have any experience with this franchise? As
the video game expert, let me chime in first, please. No, I've never played the game at all. I have heard of it. It is a PlayStation, correct?
It's across multiple platforms.
Is it?
It started off. It started as a PC game, actually, and then I think with 2. Derek, correct me if I'm wrong. I think 2 started putting it on some of the console games.
I know for sure 3. Was. Yeah, for sure 3. Yeah, 2 I think started to branch out a little bit, and then 3 was very readily available, like PlayStation. And I know that because during the early days of the pandemic, like one of the things I bought when I was kind of stocking up on things was I did a video game run after my booze run, and I was just like, oh, there, I was buying all these video games, and one of them was Diablo 3, and it ended up being like one of our, like I ended up playing that game like 3 or 4 times, like the entire campaign. Nice. With my dad, and then later my sister and brother-in-law, because you can play up to 4 at a time. So it's just a great game to really spend time on in those early days of the pandemic.
Well, plus you were getting so blackout drunk at that time. Each time it was like it was like you'd never played it before.
It's all new with Derek. Each time.
I'm like, look at all these giant spiders. I'm not imagining these, are they? Am I? I mean,
they're coming out of the screen, man.
Yeah. But the reason I bought it as well then is because the first Diablo that you mentioned, like back in 97, my dad had gotten that for the PC, and I remember like just sitting there watching him play that, and it was kind of one of my earliest experiences with horror, because I would just like watch him like go through this giant crack into hell, and then he was like fighting these skeleton creatures and drinking these potions to like amp up your health. And I remember it was pretty difficult too. Like that was like early PC days when like online gaming was pretty kind of in its infancy, and he had to like sometimes call, get a friend to like come help him out of a tough spot, or like it was just really, as a kid, it was really like freaky to watch, but I was so addicted to like watching him go on these quests. And so then Diablo 3 was a lot different like gameplay wise than that, but it was really cool to like revisit the franchise after those years. And now I'm really excited we're all kind of like, my family is like excited to get Diablo 4 eventually, and then play that and do like the 4-player quest and see how we fare against Lilith and her minions.
So if I may inquire then, again, as someone who's, got one toe into the video game world, I would, if I had more time, I would love to do some more. But let's say Diablo 3, the graphics at that time compared to now the Diablo 4 in that 10, 11 year span, has there been a lot of improvement, so much so that guys like yourself who do play a lot, it's a noticeable difference compared to someone like myself who wouldn't be as familiar?
The level of detail and texture, because the tricky thing with a game like Diablo is that it's not a lot of close-up work where you're doing like, they're all wide shots when you're playing the game, because you are playing from, it's almost as if seeing it from like a crow's point of view, and you're looking down on all the action happening. So you have to be really kind of like, the attention to detail has to be so high, and because it's something where you're seeing this from such a high view, like it could easily be something where it's just different scenery, or like just it's almost hard to describe. But the going from 3 to 4, the biggest thing that I noticed is that it seems like there is a much larger world map than before. And I will admit, I'm only like a couple of acts into this, so I haven't gotten super far. I haven't beaten the campaign, but it's it was very structured, even in the first 3, where it was like, okay, you start an act, in one area, you kind of clear out all the quests there, and then you move on to the next act. There's usually like 5 acts. Here, it's much more. There's an open world element to it, where you can do more side quests, you can explore a bigger map. It's not quite as even the first 3, I mean, there were elements of doing side quests and things like that, but like I think they take that to the next level here. So the structure of it is a lot more expansive. The attention to detail in the graphic design and the visual effects are just like, you can see where what has happened in 10 years in terms of the increase in the graphics and the special effects, the detail in the landscape as you're going from like this snowy plateau to this swamp, to there's this whole scene or this whole quest where this kind of very druidic woodsy area has been taken over by like these blood demons, so it's this just blood forest. And
fun.
The way they weave that in so it doesn't seem like jerky or clunky, the way you can go from these different like landscapes, and there's a flow to it that works really well. The other thing that I really appreciate is they've started more seamlessly integrating the cutscenes, where it used to be you do all of the the in-game stuff, you'll get to a checkpoint, and then it will be like, it will take you through some of the cinematic narration. Here, there's still some of that, but there's also a lot more of like, you'll be in a scene and it will kind of transition to a cut scene that's where you already are. So it's not like it's like, okay, stop gameplay, then we're going to go off and do this cut scene. It's giving this cinematic narrative to the scene you're already in, and then kind of like it's almost like bringing the camera in a little closer and seeing the detail a little bit more. And then when it's done, it'll back you out and you'll start playing the game again. So it's a lot more cohesiveness and seamless transition in this one than in previous entries.
Nice. Yeah, because I love the video aspect of it, like the way they tell a story, like in the third one with, you get these really cool visuals in the videos before you like fight the boss. Like in each act, you fight like the boss villain. And I know exactly what you're talking about, like with how it was a little more segmented. So having a better flow, that sounds promising. And then also from like a difficulty level, is it a little more, do you have to be a little more strategic? Because when we were playing Diablo 3, that was one of the things, is even on a higher difficulty, you still, especially playing with a team, you still felt like, okay, you can kind of handle whatever comes at you, as
3
long as
was a
you
little
just,
easy. Yeah.
and you could respawn pretty easily, and unless you got caught in like a Nephilim rift or something where you can't respawn, otherwise you were usually okay as far as like dying goes. But
Yeah. I did notice, and I'll also preempt this by saying I am not the guy who does like the hardcore difficulty levels on any video game. I will just do, I like seeing how the game progresses. I like seeing how the narrative flows out. I like collecting all the new, like, all the different like rare weapons and armor and stuff like that. I don't really care if I'm like quote unquote good at the game. Like, I just want to enjoy the game. So, this is all with the grain of salt that I'm playing this on like the easiest level. But
gotcha.
Even between 3, like 1, 2, 3, and 4, 1 and 2 are just like punishing. Even at easy levels, they are not easy games to play. I got through 3 as a necromancer, and I maybe died like 2 or 3 times. And again, this is on the easiest level, but like I never felt like that character was truly in danger. This ramps it up a little bit more. I've definitely died a few times. I do still feel like, and when I talk about the necromancer, when you're playing Diablo, you can be in part 4, you can be one of 5 classes. You can be a barbarian, a sorcerer, a druid, a rogue, or a necromancer. I really like being a necromancer because you get to roll with a crew of like skeletons and golems. So like you're never alone, even if you're playing by yourself. So I do feel like there's a certain, to a certain extent, the necromancer is a little overpowered as a class. I know we're getting into like the really nerdy weeds when we're talking. I almost said OP instead of overpowered, but I figured that would be just a little bit too nerdy. So, but yeah, it's still a little overpowered compared to, I think, some of the other classes you can play. But it's fun. I like the there's still a lot of that. The gameplay is based off of how well you build your character, and so you don't necessarily have to like be super nuanced with pressing the buttons and like knowing what combos and stuff to do. You basically need to be able to have built your character in a way that the buttons you press will be as effective as possible. So it's kind of a mix of good building and then, for me, button mashing. I'm sure there are going to be some like hardcore players who'll be like, well, then you suck at this game and I don't know what you're talking about it. But the way I play it, that tends to be how it goes.
The narrative parts the narrative parts, is it like a government training video where you have to watch the whole thing, otherwise
you can skip
can't get to the next
so there's actually a few different tacks you can take. This
question comes from a member in the audience who doesn't like to sit and
so you have a few different ways you can approach it. You can either advance the scene faster by, like, if someone's in the middle of a sentence, you can hit X and it'll advance the scene, or you can hold down, I think on PlayStation, it's like the circle, and just cut it entirely. So if you're someone who doesn't give a crap about the lore, you don't have to really dig into the lore.
Could you like kick someone in the nuts and then it goes to the next scene? I think that would be cool.
That would look so cool if you could do that.
That sounds more like God of War, maybe, or something similar.
A little too violent.
Yeah, no, I have not yet seen kicking someone in the nuts as a way to get through a cutscene, but I will email the folks at Blizzard and see if maybe that's some downloadable content they can put.
If you could do that, please. Yeah,
no problem.
That'd be great.
Just pass that along.
So Derek, I forget, did you say, have you gotten to play this at all yet, or is this still an anticipatory?
It's still, for you. It's still haven't played it yet, but it's definitely going to happen. It's just, I know it came out like right at the beginning of summer, and it's always so busy, especially we're like trying to soak up as much, like we're just like out like with solar panels, just trying to soak up as much sun as we can in Minnesota before our long winter comes again. So that's usually when I play the most video games, is like in the winter.
Yeah, that's fair.
it and then but I sometimes you find a game like with The Last of Us or something like that where you just get, it doesn't matter what time of year it is, you just get sucked in and you're like, I have to keep playing this until it's over. But we just haven't. And then with this one too, it's like all four of us are going to play it at once. So we're kind of waiting for like the stars to align a little bit, and then we'll have some time to really dig into it. So it's definitely, it's like been one of those things where like we all have agreed though that we are definitely going to set aside the time to play Diablo 4 at some point by this year. So it'll be fun to dive into that.
And doing
you can
it
maybe even have a cocktail while you're doing it.
Right. I think I still have some booze left over from that epic run in 2020. So,
and I will say,
yeah,
doing the co-op is a lot of fun. So like playing alone is a great time, but yeah, it's definitely and you can do with this, you can do couch co-op, which means you can do it with people in the same room, or you can do it online, which is what I've been doing. I've got some friends that I've been playing with, which has been a lot of fun. So yeah, if you can,
I finally canceled my PlayStation Live.
Scott,
looks like you can't be part of the party, man.
I had to. I kept not using it for a year and a half, I think, at the price of like $14 Canadian a month. Yeah. So I'm like, finally one day I caught it just in time.
And then the next day we reached out and we're like, hey, we're jumping on Dead by Daylight. Get in here, Scott.
It's Friday the 13th time. Woo,
then he wept himself to
I'll
sleep.
play Jason, just chase people around the woods myself.
And you can't do that, Scott. Like Texas Chainsaw Massacre game is coming out in like a month, and
it's done, we got
to jump in there.
It's gone. It's done.
Well, you can still play against the computer, and that's all
that matters.
Well. Yeah, you can have your own war games.
You can play with yourself, Scott.
Listen.
Careful.
Anyway. Oh, there's nothing to be careful about.
That's Diablo 4.
Like a spider monkey over here.
Yeah. Oh no. Okay, I'm gonna just sprint on by that, and we're gonna move on. I'm sure we'll come back with some Diablo 4 updates as Derek gets into it, and some of the other. I know Jonathan has been talking about wanting to do it sometime in the fall. So, we'll I'm sure return to that at some point. But for now, Derek, what do you have for us today?
Ooh, well, since it is the summer, and I guess I haven't been playing as many video games, but I have been trying to get back into reading a little more regularly. And
you can read?
I can. I know it took us almost to episode 300, but that is my big secret. I can indeed read, and and I was actually at the library, which is. That used to be like a summer tradition when I was a kid, is like my mom would take my sister and I to the library every Wednesday, because they'd always have like, I don't know if it's this way like all around the country, but they'd always have like a live performance at the library. Like it'd be a magician or like a singer, like, or a clown. And
I mean, honestly, Derek, I couldn't tell you because our library growing up was the video store. So
okay.
Really do any live performances.
So it was like, it was the next best thing then. But
it's okay. I'll set this question out, since this one was just for America.
I'm sorry.
No.
They don't.
Come on, Scott. I'm not that far from the border.
Yeah. They don't have those free book loading stores up in Canada.
You just had to say North America. That's all you got to say.
Like, I'm trying to be as inclusive as I can, and I'm blowing
fucking Lee Greenwood over here shooting rockets out of his ass.
Hey, Canada gave us Loverboy and Bryan Adams, and I'm forever grateful for the music. So
don't blame me if you don't like What do you got?
And so we went to the library, and I did not get juggled by a magician like I did like in the 90s, but which did happen. when they asked for a volunteer, I did not expect that they were going to have me put on a styrofoam helmet and then juggle me through the air, which I think might backfire at this point if I were to do that nowadays. Like I am with like.
Oh, yeah, we're not done with this. How old were you?
7 or 8, probably somewhere in there.
7 or 8, and so they put a styrofoam helmet on you. Wait, what was this going to do?
Time out. Is this a bit, or are you serious? Did this actually happen to you?
No, you can ask my mom. It definitely happened. There are witnesses. My sister was there.
It's in Wikipedia. Boy with igloo cooler on head.
All right.
Falls in library.
Everybody shut up. The rest of the episode will be nothing but this story. Derek, go.
No time. Clear your schedules. Okay.
I can't be the only one that in the summer for entertainment, you went to the library to get juggled by a magician.
You're the only one on this podcast.
Not even getting into the innuendo factor of that sentence. No, we need to hear this story.
As far as I remember, and I'll have to do some fact checking, for later episodes, but you'd all be in this big room, and they got a big show. There had to have been like 100 kids in the room, and then
did they all get juggled, or was it just were you the lucky one?
It was just me.
Me and a couple of wearing styrofoam helmets.
Look at me now, Ma.
He came in with the styrofoam helmet.
No, I'm not saying that I got a lot of hang time, but I was at least
don't get ahead of yourself.
Yeah.
Tell us how it came to be. Tell us how it came to be. Large room, 100 kids.
100 kids.
Which is probably difficult to do.
Some dubious babysitting going on. Okay, carry on.
And you're up there. The magician is like, I need a volunteer. So I go up there.
And he's
like, yep. He says, like, well, put this on. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I don't know why I'm going to need this, but you put it on, and it's like, those really cheap, like, styrofoam helmets that you could get for like $1,
Yes, no, I want to stay here for a while. Take your time with this. I need to focus on the safety aspect of this magic trick. The styrofoam helmet.
Clearly, they were very safety forward by buying the dollar store helmet,
and it was styrofoam. That's what's going to stop your head from cracking open.
Right. I mean, just in case. Or I don't know how that would go with the ceiling fan, but thankfully I didn't get thrown that.
I just needed to know that.
And he takes out a couple of bowling pins, and he's like, all right, I'm going to do some. Now I'm gonna, all right, perfect. It's me and the bowling pins. I know, like, exactly. That's great for the self-esteem as a child. Like, this is your equivalent for the next 5-minute act. Maybe that's why I put the helmet on to like fit in. I don't know.
Were you small? Were you a small child?
I was a small. Yeah, I did not really hit a growth spurt until like later in high school, even after high school. So
okay. And I'm was a small child. I'm a small adult. So I'm just trying to help get the image. So you were a little bigger than the bowling pins, though. I'm assuming.
Oh yeah. I was.
But he grabbed you by your leg and then put you in the juggle. Go ahead.
It was kind of like, I think more like under the armpit, under like the calf or ankle or something like that. Kind of just like and I would have to ask someone in the audience.
No, I don't know. Just like,
but
please tell us.
The standard juggling procedure, Scott.
Under an armpit,
Scott, he's clearly been doing this by the book. He picked up a 7 or 8 year old kid. He gave him a dollar store styrofoam helmet, and he's going through the standard routine under the armpit, around the ankle.
The calf, around the calf.
I mean, this is probably, this is standard summer library procedure. I mean,
in Minnesota.
In Minnesota? Yeah, I mean, it's just it's summer. You got to embrace the summer in Minnesota. I guess this is how you do it.
Juggle a minor. Okay.
What I remember, and I think it was more of like, okay, you're getting tossed around in the air a little bit, but you're not really like. I don't know where the bowling pins were going, but they had to have been somewhere in the air. So maybe I don't know what it looked like necessarily to the rest of the room, but I just know that for a short time, I was being kind of not really thrown through the air, but more just like kind of just, I don't know. Just
swayed through the air?
Swayed. Yes, that's a good word.
So he would like sway
and there were bowling pins. Somewhere in
swayed
the
you
area.
with one hand, swayed you with one arm while the other arm was like throwing bowling pins
that were not on fire, thankfully. But I was
but your styrofoam helmet was on fire.
Well,
and at some point,
those babies tend to heat up real fast.
They do.
Now it's just starting to sound like a Simpsons skit, but I swear this is not me trying to even embellish it. This is what I remember. And at some point I was set back on the ground and, a little dizzy, but otherwise fine. And there was probably a decent amount of applause and probably a few horrified looks in the audience. And then I went and, sat back down on the carpet square and just watched whatever the rest of the show entailed.
All right.
Then I went and rented my library books.
So this is all the intro to Derek's book, but my one last request to the listeners, if there is anyone who has a VHS tape that they remember, like they were taking video footage in the Minnesota area of a kid getting juggled at a library event from, I guess this would have been what, like late 90s, early 2000s?
I would say, because I was pretty young, probably, late 90s.
Okay.
So definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
If we can find footage of Derek being juggled, that would make my life. Like I would just
that's all one YouTube search there.
That's the dream. Derek Anderson, styrofoam helmet, Minnesota library juggle magician.
Standard keywords that's probably been searched for 1,000 times
in Minnesota for sure.
So this ties into Derek's book choice.
Yes, and keep in mind too, we waited like an hour in the summer heat to get into a show like this. So this was premium entertainment.
This was standing room only to watch kids get juggled.
But thankfully, I did not get juggled when I went to the library this time.
Oh.
It was a much easier experience getting my books this time. So
but he still has the helmet. And it still fits.
He won't go into a helmet anymore without the helmet.
I know. I do not. I don't take any chances going to the library anymore. I go there small head, prepared.
Folks. That's what I'm trying to say.
I actually bring the bowling pins now when I go to the library because I just assume that this is going to happen. He looks like a bowling pin
now. It's just a wee head with glasses.
And on that note, I did check out a couple books, and one of them, I used to read Stephen King like all the time, and I realized I think the last book I read by King was Dr. Sleep in like 2020, and so I'm like,
now you hate him? Wow.
Well, it is funny because I do remember on the podcast I did say that in that case I actually liked the Mike Flanagan movie better than the book. So, but it didn't. Like, I liked the book. I just didn't, I love the movie. So, but I was like, I really gotta read some King again. And, to be less intimidating, because some of his books are over 1,000 pages, I got like the shortest book he's ever written, probably, other than Cycle of the Werewolf. And that was Elevation, which is kind of more of a novella. It's like 148 pages. And we're all doing show and tell here on the podcast as I hold up my book that none of you listeners can see. And it came out in 2018. It's actually set in Castle Rock, which of course is a setting.
Wow, that's a curveball.
Yeah, exactly, right. And there's some nice shout outs to like Cujo, and even though it's not in Derry, there is like a kind of a Pennywise illusion in here. But it's really not. I don't want to get hate mail, but it's really not horror. It's elevated. Literally, it's elevation.
Oh, God.
So it's no, and I definitely.
I'm going to send this as direct to you as I can. I hate that. I hate you for saying that. Don't say that. How's that? Is that direct enough?
Can you just write it in a letter though? So
you need that in email as well.
But honestly, I'm not just saying this because of the title. It is it's more, I don't know what to call it. So basically it is kind of spooky though, because basically the gist of the story is this guy, kind of this middle-aged guy, goes to his friend who's a retired doctor because he's realizing that even though like he feels like he's getting lighter, and even though there's no change like in his physical appearance, he can tell every time he weighs himself that he's losing like according to the scale, he's losing like 3 pounds a day, but he doesn't seem to be losing any weight. And so like throughout the course of this novella, he keeps getting literally like, it's like gravity. It's not so much his appearance, but like gravity's hold on him is loosening. So like he all of a sudden has more energy. He can like start to jump really high. He can run farther than he ever could before. So it's almost like he's becoming weightless without looking like he's losing weight. So it's kind of like it's a less mean-spirited version of like Thinner, which Stephen King wrote as Richard Bachman. So, and basically he kind of has this impending like feeling that he's going to die when the scale tells him that he like that it's 0. And so throughout the book, he kind of starts like just changing his attitude about life and like living more and that kind of thing. And there's also his neighbors are a married couple, Deidre and Missy, and they own a restaurant in town, and they've been facing a lot of prejudice because in this small town in the Northeast, like a lot of the townspeople don't like that they have these like homophobic thoughts about, a same-sex married couple running a restaurant in town. So it's like he kind of is trying to basically like, he's trying to like change everyone's attitude about that as well and be like, okay, this is stupid that you have these thoughts about this great couple. And so it's there's a lot going on in there. And but yeah, throughout the course of the book, it's like him coming to terms with this weightlessness. And it goes to some places that you don't expect. So it's a quick but very interesting read, and a return to Castle Rock.
It's funny because it kind of sounds like it would be another one of like Stephen King's epics, but it's only 150 pages. So I feel like he's packing a lot into a small amount of space there.
That's a really good point, because I feel like, especially because King, as you know, he can write like he has no trouble writing longer works. I feel like he actually, like, this easily could have been like, at least a 300-page book, if not more, because he kind of like it. But I think it kind of benefits from being shorter because it's so fast paced. Like, it has this urgency where he keeps getting this loss of weight and everything. And at first it's kind of like comical, but then like he's like, oh crap, I'm like floating up towards the ceiling now and stuff like that. And like, how am I going to deal with day-to-day life? And then dealing with kind of these, some very hateful, like homophobic characters in the book too. And so there's a lot going on in there. And it's like, I almost wanted to spend more time with some of the characters, but I think for King, it's kind of refreshing because it's almost like an expanded short story, and I picked it up because it was shorter. So, for that reason, I think it benefited story wise, and it's something that I think, it kind of takes you back to, Castle Rock, but it's also not as like in your face as like Cujo necessarily. So if like someone is trying to like ease into King a little bit and see if they like him, I think this is a good starting point too.
Nice. Very nice.
Yeah. Cool. So we'll see. It'll probably be like turned into like a massive like 10 season series, even though it's 150 pages.
Sorry, when did this come out, Derek?
This came out in 2018. So
2018. Okay, so like 5 years ago or
5
so?
years ago. Yep. Okay. So it's one of it. Not as I think he's already written like 6 or 7 books since then, but fairly recent for King though. So it's the recent one of his that I've been hearing a lot of great stuff about, just out in the wild whenever King comes up, of later more recent work that I want to check out is Revival. I do want to. Yeah,
that really one is supposed to be quite potent and pack quite a punch. And I want to say someone tried a couple years ago to get a film adaptation off the ground, right? Does that sound familiar?
Mike Flanagan really wanted to.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right.
And I've heard that it's like, because I know some people, that like King has gone more into like crime and thrillers and things like that in the last 10 years. But you could always argue that, there's horror elements of it. But I heard that Revival in particular is more like old school King, like it really goes
like
for the
hardcore,
jugular.
hardcore
So
horror,
and it's like it's so hard to keep up because there's like he's on like a 2 book a year pace. Like him and Kuntz are just like, you know, just setting like such a prolific pace that's hard to keep up on.
Yeah, so
on the
it's
new
like
releases.
you should get like a new Guided by Voices album every time Stephen King puts out an album. Just coincide with each other, right? New book, new album, new book, new album.
So it looks like
Exactly. So
we've got a couple of King options. We've got one for like the Gateway with Elevation, and then we've got one for your hardcore King fans with Revival. You said correct? Or
Revival, yes, which
Cool.
I think is, spoiler alert, I think it has to do with like revival, like evangelicalism.
Yep.
Got that?
Perfect. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Yep.
totally a word.
Mhm.
Yep.
No
Totally
notes.
Yeah.
We
Got to move on.
can get
after
rid
that,
of those
but no
6
way-
extra syllables.
No
in the
better
mix.
button than that one. So
Right.
with that, we'll move on. Scott, what do you got for us?
I'm ready. Just warming up the tongue. Well, you know, it's interesting. Here we are, video games, books. It's not that hard in horror, as you mentioned at the top, Brian, that if movies are off the table, TV is off the table, we have these other expressions of horror. My choice is one of my earliest starting points for horror, which would be the EC comics that I used to read as a little kid. The first time I read these were at a convenience store in a small town in Saskatchewan called Estevan. And I remember walking in the front door and the bell chiming, and the first smell you smell is the smell of that comic book ink that hits your nose. Because you know that the new issues of everything are out, and there's all these just wonderful comics waiting for you. I was always into the horror ones. If I had a superhero druthers when I was a kid, it would be The Flash. But the horror comics are where it was at, because you would be able to buy without the covers. They would be the last month's issues. The covers would be torn off. 4 or 5 comics rolled together, elastic band put on, and for a quarter, you take home this mystery bundle of comic books.
Back in my day.
Yeah, just the best, right? You know,
Why did they take the covers off?
They have to legally take the covers off. Same with books in bookstores. If you're disposing, and they often will, you have to remove the covers for legal reasons.
Okay.
Yeah. So you get all these comics without the covers, but you know, who cares? You're still getting the stories, which brings me to what I'm here to coo and ooh and ah about, and that's the EC Comics archives that is currently being published by Dark Horse Comics. The editions I have are, I believe, from 2012, so roughly over 10 years or so. What you're getting is a series of omnibuses based on EC Comics' 3 main horror comic books that they put out between 1950 and 1955, which was Tales from the Crypt, Vault of Horror, and The Haunt of Fear. And those 3 were bi-monthly magazines that did gangbusters with the youth of America and Canada. And they did so well that, of course, your moral majority and your, subcommittee hearings led to the arrival of the Comics Code, which, oddly enough, one of the main people from EC Comics, William Gaines, he actually helped bring the Comics Code about, but they ended up using it against him. And They used it as a moral guide.
Mm.
And so there was no more horror from 55 till, I believe, the late 60s till it was done with. Don't quote me on those dates, but I can tell you from 50 to 55 were just these amazing comics that were put out, and not just in those three horror subsidiaries. The whole line of EC Comics had some ties, not all of them, but a lot of them had ties to horror. There was the first Tales from the Crypt came from Suspense Stories, which came from EC Comics. EC Comics, of course, started in the 40s, and it was educational comics first, and then it became entertainment comics, and then it became EC Comics. Max Gaines started when he died. His son William took over, started making these. So what he did, and another guy named Al Feldstein, who was an artist, they would take old stories, Edgar Allan Poe stories, etc., and they would twist them. They would come up with their own versions on the twists and come up with new stories, just like anyone else who's a creator. You learn from the best, and then you kind of put your own spin on it. But the roster of talent, if you're a fan of comic book art, like classic comic book art of the 50s and 60s, or the 50s especially, these are just amazing. The one I'm currently reading, and they're huge. Each volume, I'm reading Tales from the Crypt, Volume 1, the EC Archives, with a foreword by John Carpenter. And what you get essentially is 24 stories, 4 full issues of 6 stories each of different editions, different issues between 50 and 55. The artists roster alone, half the guys who are working on these would go on to Mad Magazine, including the man who created Mad Magazine, Hertzman. Oh no, I got it wrong. Pardon me. Anyway, the creator of Mad started with the horror line. Jack
I believe it was
Davis,
Alfred E. Newman. I believe
Alfred E. Newman. You're absolutely correct. A lot of the early Mad Magazine guys started with these EC Comics horror ones, especially. And so I'm just slowly making my way through these, and there's just, because like I said, there's 24 stories per volume, all in wonderful paper, great color, and the stories are and the artwork is really what is interesting, because not all of the storytelling so far, and again, I'm only in the first volume, not all of the stories are great. So far, the best story I've come across was used for Tales from the Crypt episode 1 or 2, I believe, with William Sadler, the man who cheated death.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm correct, that one is in this volume 1. That is in there. Some veer more towards crime so far in this volume, because again, like I said, there's a lot of crossover with these storytellers and these artists between the titles, right? They would all help each other out and hop and back and forth. But the artwork is simply just gorgeous. And the storytelling it's so economical and so well done. Is every story, does it have a great twist? not necessarily. There's a couple stories that end with, explanations from like a police officer about what happened.
The psycho ending.
Yeah, there's a couple psycho endings to the stories because I don't know, they just didn't know how to end and whatever. But that's
We've
not
got
important.
two
The
panels
important
left.
thing, the important thing is
Make it work.
the spirit of it, right? And so far, these are just they're fantastic. I recommend everyone to get them. I have 5 so far, I believe, out of I'm not sure how many I'm going to get, but I have 5 volumes so far, and they're such a treat. Old ads, they got great old ads. They have great old mail bags as well. Just terrific stuff. So yeah, that's really what I'm digging into right now.
I think what I love about this so much is that they keep bringing this back for new generations, because I actually remember in the 90s growing up and there being reprints of the old EC comics. It was and they didn't even at that point they were doing it as like single standalone issues rather than like the trade paperbacks. But yeah, I have similar memories of being at like the local pharmacy and like picking up the quote unquote new EC comic of the week. And it would just be like, there would be just all the same ones: Tales from the Crypt, Vault of Horror, Haunt of Fear. And I think what I was most striking is the fine line that they always towed with, like, these were sometimes really gory graphic comics, but they would avoid using like red ink for the blood. Like they found ways to be able to like get into this really gnarly artwork without like skirting, like they were skirting the edge of like what they could and couldn't get away with. But also with the stories, I remember them being a little hit or miss, and some of them being downright like the one I have the most striking memory of. It's like it's a funny, like very EC-esque plot twist, like O. Henry, not really O. Henry, but kind of like that ironic thing at the end. But this was like, in hindsight, it's one of the most misogynistic stories. It's this guy who is trying to, it's like this harrowed husband who is trying to save money so that like he can buy like a tool like bench or something like that, and he can't save up his money because his wife keeps spending it on food. And it's so like, this is the most sexist thing, and it's like she keeps buying these Whitman samplers, like these chocolate boxes, and so it gets to the point where he just goes insane. He murders her with an axe, chops up her body, and turns it into a big Whitman sampler where her body parts are the different pieces of candy. And it's just like it's striking, for the big reveal at the end, because it is like they show you the box where you see the body parts in it and the different names he's given it. So it's like, it's very creative, but it's also just like, that's horrible. Like, what?
Yeah, see, like, it should have been a reversal.
Take my wife,
it should have been a reversal where she finds out this is what he does, and you think at the end that he kills her, but she ends up killing him and putting him into a Whitman's sampler because she's gone insane.
Yeah. And also, not to mention the fact that like part of the issue is that she's also getting fat, which is part of why.
Well, that's just straight up awful. That's just horrible.
Gosh.
That's not getting fixed in rewrites.
That has to be hacked itself into pieces.
That's burn it down and start again.
Exactly.
But yeah, the playful 50s misogyny aside, I do like, there's a lot of those really do stand the test of time, just in terms of being these just classic examples of horror stories, and just, these artists and storytellers just getting to play. It's almost like the comic version of like what they did with Freddy's Nightmares, where it was like, let's just see how weird and goofy we can get with this stuff, and see who can get attracted to it.
Yeah, and it wasn't only these that were on the shelves, like Creepy Magazine and Eerie, and I have a bunch of Creepy magazines from the 70s, which is put out by the famous Monsters parent company, Warren Publishing, as opposed to EC. But there was so much horror in other media besides movies and TV. Comics. One of my favorite comics as a kid was Morbius, not the movie, but the actual, but the comic, the comic book. It was a cool comic. Same with Dracula.
Oh yeah.
Dracula at Night was, I think it was called Dracula at Night. That was a really good one. There was tons of really great horror comics in the
Werewolf
day.
by Night.
Yes, Werewolf by Night. Yeah, that was
Swamp
great.
Thing.
Swamp Thing was great. Yeah,
Man
Swamp
Thing.
Thing by Night. Man Thing by Night.
Yeah, everything was by night.
Shazam by night.
Oh yeah, there was like Dracula's Tomb. I remember was
That's what it was. Sorry,
yes.
Dracula's Tomb.
And
yes,
you know it's funny because I would go to like comic book shops and garage sales too were great for this, and you could find a lot of these like issues from like the 70s, like especially Marvel had a lot of great horror comics. But then just watching like or Creep Show growing up and seeing like the EC Comics influence in that made me want to like seek out some of these influences because you're like, oh, so they're kind of directly inspired by that. I should read that too. And then actually I can find big surprise, I can find a way to tie this into Riverdale. But,
what?
on the just to catch you up on the latest or the latest and final season of Riverdale, Archie and the gang have been transported back in time to the 50s, and they don't really realize that they've gone back in time, but they're like in the 50s, and naturally Jughead gets a job writing horror stories for like an EC Comics type publisher that happens to be in town, and they end up the principal Weatherby or Featherhead in this alternate universe ends up kind of representing the Comics Code Authority. Yeah, and so it kind of. And also there is a character named Brad Rayberry who is kind of befriends Jughead. And so they end up teaming up to kind of fight the like a version of the Comics Code Authority. And meanwhile, there's also a milkman murderer going door to door. And yeah, there's a lot going on. But anyway, so
I remember when the show premiered, it was like it was going to be like the comic book, just an everyday
right.
Dude, now they're like fucking time traveling, killing Abe Lincoln, sex with Suzanne Summers. Like, what is going on in this show?
And there is an EC Comics. The cool part though is they did do like an episode that was like an EC Comics Creep Show type anthology episode where they kind of did stories that were like kind of straight out of the pages of an EC Comics. And yeah, there was a lot of axe hacking and macabre things going on. So that we got that out of it, which was nice.
Well, speaking of which, weren't you you also wanted to talk today about
yes.
This is a good connection to there's an actual Archie anthology comic with some like summer horror stories, right?
Yes, I did not even plan this segue, but it works perfectly. So thank you for setting that up. This is
thank you for highlighting the segue, the exact opposite of what a segue is supposed to do.
Yes, after all that brilliant work, let me just call out what you just did. Like showing that's worse than showing the magician's magic trick or
wearing
juggling
a styrofoam helmet, right?
Derek, do you just want to kick me in the nuts and then we'll just wrap up the episode? Or
sure, yeah. So that's the new Diablo feature, right? So I mean, might as well start testing it out. So anyway, after that nice segue, so Archie Comics rather has been over the last few years really getting into like these horror one shots where they'll do like every month they'll release like a horror version of Archie Comics. So like, Archie and the gang in Riverdale, but like, maybe it's a slasher issue, or they do like they did Pop Tate's Chocolate Shop of Horrors and different things like that. And this past or yeah, it was earlier this summer. They released what was called Camp Pickens, which is anthology of summer camp horror stories set in the Archie comics universe. So you have like campfire stories. You've got a story that is very much inspired by Friday the 13th and Jason Voorhees. And you've got this great wraparound story with Jughead as a camp counselor, and he is taking these him and the campers are like fighting all these monsters, and they realize that the only way to stay safe from these monsters is they have to like the story's called Bug Juice, and they have to like get the juice from these bugs and drink it, and that's the only way that they can stay immune from all the horrors of Camp Pickens. But it's great fun. It's they do a really good job bringing together. The great thing about these one shots is they bring together comic book artists and writers from all across all these different publishers, and they invite them to come in and like do a horror story set in the world of Archie. And so you get all these really great different perspectives and stories. And if you want to keep up on Archie horror too, we've been really honored to have Jamie L. Rotanti has been writing a column on Daily Dead called Archie's House of Horror, where every month when a new Archie horror one shot is released, she'll kind of write about it and kind of give insights into the whole creative process of how that issue came together. But Camp Pickens is the latest one, and it definitely hits that summer camp horror sweet spot that I love so much. So would definitely recommend checking it out.
Very cool. Very cool. And I think with that, that's a good place for us to wrap it up for tonight. I do want to mention, if there is anyone looking for ways, you might be asking yourself, with the strike, with the writer's strike and the Screen Actors and Writers Guild strike, what's kind of the etiquette with stuff like that? Should we not be watching new content? As fans, they are expressly not asking for people to boycott new movies or content right now. Please enjoy the new stuff that you're looking forward to. In fact, in some ways, they want to make sure people are still going to these things so that the studios don't use like a dip in attendance as leverage to say, well, no one's going to see this stuff anyway. So definitely go check that stuff out. You can also contribute. And I know there's probably a sense to which it's like, these actors are millionaires. Why do they need our financial support through this? It's not the millionaire actors. It's not the Tom Cruises. It's not the Nicole Kidmans who are supporting with these. It's the journeyman actors, the people who are doing this paycheck to paycheck, probably have one or more other jobs supporting the work that they're doing. And they're the ones who this is going to hurt. This is going to hit them hard. So there are ways that you can support. For example, the Entertainment Community Fund. You can go to entertainmentcommunity.org. That is one resource where you can make sure that there is some financial support to the work that they're doing. But beyond that, just keep supporting actors, keep supporting writers. Try and seek out not just the big studio stuff, seek out the smaller stuff, seek out other forms of media. A lot of people who are writing in movies and TV also kind of do their own thing with books and comic books and things like that. So seek these things out. So this is kind of how we're pointing people into different directions where they can find stuff that maybe isn't on the screen right now. But with that, we just want to thank Bryan, our engineer, for helping us out each and every episode. And as always, we want to thank you, our listeners, including those of you who have signed up to become a Corpse Club member. Make sure you visit corpseclub.com, check out our latest episodes. You can also sign up to become a member. You'll get access to t-shirts, membership cards, bonus episodes, all that good stuff. Don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Every rating and review helps. You can also find us on Google Play, SoundCloud, and all your favorite podcast providers. To get in touch, you can reach us anytime at contact@corpseclub.com, on Twitter on X at Daily Dead News or at Corpse Club, and on Instagram and Facebook under Corpse Club. Thank you again for listening, and until next time, stay scary.